All right, we are back again. Hello again, Internet. This is the Deep Weeb podcast, a podcast about immersion-based learning without sacrificing personal development and other deep things like manga recommendations. I'm Kanji Eater.
I'm Jordan.
So today will be on episode 3 of the podcast, where we're going to be talking about the monolingual transition and the dictionary workflows that go along with that. Last time we talked about exercise, and before that we were talking about morning routines. So this is the first episode where we've actually just focused on a pure deep topic for us, the thing that we've been focusing a lot of energy on, our Japanese. So why don't we jump over to chat and kind of talk about what's been going on with not only ourselves. So we'll talk a little bit about what's been changing for us over the last 2 weeks since the last podcast, things that are going well. And if you are here on Twitch, as this is live, you can actually type into the chat and that'll show up on screen, and we can have conversations about things that other people have also been experiencing that have been good this week in their pursuit of whatever deep thing they're going on. So it was actually interesting seeing on Twitter, I posted it, if you can't make it to the live show, all well and good. One person, I think was it Himamawari? Was their username? They posted that they're working on their PhD simultaneously trying to do I think they're Japanese, doing some MIA Japanese stuff. What about you, Jordan? Did you ever do you said going through college you were also still dabbling in Japanese? How'd you manage to balance that? Because I couldn't.
It was just it was a like you said, it was a balance. Some days were better than others. And I guess I was in it for the long haul. I think just having that in mind, knowing that okay, this might take me a few years more than if I studied 8 hours a day, for 2 years. So I was just kind of okay, I'm trying not to sacrifice my life and everything for this, and try to keep the bigger picture in mind.
Yeah. For me, I was well, I would love to take a Japanese class, and I think that would kickstart me. I've, had traditional language learner mindset there. I kind of need to go to class to learn this stuff. But I waited till the last semester of college and then got in one there. But it was oh man, if I would have had intense computer science classes during that time, there would have been no way I would have been able to keep up with anything Japanese, whether it's doing my own Anki reviews or anything else. And I think that was really a reflection of my mindset at the time, and just being able to balance out multiple things, which I was really, really bad at. But because it was school was you talked about balance. I didn't have any balance. It was all school all the time, and it wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy it at all. So I won't be going back anytime soon. So
you and me both.
So shout out to them for actually sticking through it and managing to balance a PhD on top of that, because that's rough. What about you, Jordan? What have you been up to the last 2 weeks? Making any progress?
So the last 2 weeks, my progress, I would say, has been more internally. So with not being as hard on myself, and then focusing on consistency. So just trying to, I've been getting up. I think this week I get up for the most part around 6. So 6:30 typically was the time, and so I changed it to 6. That way I did more of my morning routine and didn't really have to sacrifice that for Japanese. And then just focus on trying to do a little bit every day, and trying to set little okay, I read this much. So that's been changed. And
so you tracking it now? You said you're doing this much. Are you actually tracking it, or what?
Yes and no. So it's more of okay, I got a half hour of reading
Gotcha.
in the session.
Okay.
Or I got an hour here. So it's more of setting a time frame for myself more than me writing it down.
Gotcha. So what about you? Okay, so you mentioned you're now getting up at 6, so that's a change from before. What spurred that?
Just I felt in the mornings, I feel mornings are my sacred time. Nobody's awake. Nobody is up. And so I live with other people. So it's I can get up, not be bothered, not have to run around and do something. It's just like it's my time for me. So I was like, okay, getting up a little half hour early because I think I was already getting up at like 6:20 and going for a walk. So I'm just like, okay, another 20 minutes isn't gonna kill me.
Yeah.
So it was more just like, okay, I want to try to really, really, stretch my time and be, use it to the best of my ability.
Right. Yeah. So that's I've also been making some tweaks along the exercise route. I think I talked about it last time about jumping into. So I've been trying to measure my heart rate. So that just so I know, like, actually, if a workout is really a workout, because it's like, okay, if I walk for 20 minutes, is that good enough? Like, is that
right?
Did I exercise for today? Does it count?
Yeah.
And so depends. It turned out it's one of those things I'm still trying to figure out how to do consistently, because it's a new habit. So I missed a few days, but I'm actually starting to measure it. So that's good. And then I also started doing strength training as well, which you can almost see in the bottom of my camera on that side. There's some tiny barbells for my little scrawny little arms to do some workouts with. But it's good because I mean I'm exercising muscles I don't think I've exercised since high school sports, so it's been a while. So physical stuff I've been making progress on that. What about you, as far as, like, you said you're reading stuff? What sort of stuff you've been reading?
Still, so it's been a mix. Manga, Promised Neverland. I think I'm on volume 8.
Woo! Making some progress.
Yeah, I'm just chugging along. I found where it ended in the. I think a guy tweeted. I followed him on Twitter. He tweeted, was like, "Oh yeah, like, by the way, like, volume 5 is where it moves on."
Right.
And so I was like, I think I was on volume 4. So I like skimmed volume 4. I'm like, perfect. Got to volume 5, and I was like, all right, perfect. This is gonna get me excited. This is gonna get me, wanting to read. And then I've been reading light novels as well. I know go back and forth, and I go back and forth and change my mind on it a lot. But I think I'm hoping to. What am I reading? The Pokemon. It's like a Pokemon. I know they just recently did, either this year or last year, they redid the first movie. And
right, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, they did some weird animations or some different animations with it.
It's like CG-ish, right?
Right, right. And then they did a light novel as well. And so I was like, oh, okay. I've seen this a bunch of times.
Right.
And I read it. I got to read a sample, and then I was like, okay, this is good enough. I can read this smooth enough without looking too much up and enjoying it. And so I was like, okay, let me go ahead and read that. So I've been reading that, and I'm like 18% through that.
Nice.
So I'm just like, trying to really like schedule it. Like, I think another guy, I think his name is Hyper Tiger, or I can't remember his name. He has Hypothetical Tiger. He is also studying Japanese, and I found his YouTube channel somehow, and he was saying how, like, he was reading one manga a day, and I think with a max of 5. And I really like that approach, because I feel like, as you know,
you're talking like one full volume there,
right?
Okay,
right. And so it's just like, as I'm, we're both working adults, we have things to do. We work a 9 to 5, and so it's just like, if I get into my head, like, hey, read a whole one a day, like, it just eliminates me from worrying about what I need to do. It's just like, oh, read one.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I've been like, I took that, and I was like, oh, okay, I think I can try to apply that to my life and try to read one with like a max of like maybe 5 in a week. So I'm like, that still gives me a chance to rest on Saturdays and Sundays if I don't get to it. So do something like that.
Yeah.
So
that sounds really nice, actually, because I remember when I was just like crushing through some manga volumes, I was doing that. I was at least doing like one a day, and it's I mean, when you're doing one a day for a month, it's that adds up to you completing like full series pretty quickly.
Right.
So and then that in turn, makes it really satisfying to keep going. So yeah, good luck with that.
Thank you.
So I just finished this week Gyakuten Saiban 4. So that's the first visual novel I've ever actually completed. So that was pretty cool. It's also, I mean, it's like it's court series that, goes back and forth, and like the plot is intentionally confusing and you have to solve it, like all that sort of stuff. So watching a let's play of it, first off, makes it way easier. but it made it so that, I mean, I was able to comprehend. I felt like I comprehended most of all of it, and then I still have like a couple questions that it's like, okay, I feel like it was at my level, so I could understand it, but there were still points I was like, was I just daydreaming when they covered this part? Did I actually miss it? Is it actually a plot hole? Like, I don't know. So I have a couple questions that I'm gonna have to go track down on some probably like Japanese forum, or maybe I'll get lazy and just post it on the Ace Attorney English Reddit or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. So what about you? Are you watching like much Japanese YouTube? Because that's where I was watching it in a separate browser. So and that's something unexplored to me. So I'm curious how much you've done with that.
I'd say so. Yes, it's not dedicated as it should be, or maybe not as it should be, as most people have it. I did. So the idea of using it in a separate browser, I picked that up. So I started using Firefox for my Japanese YouTube. So that's been good. But as far as like going specifically, not really. Every now and again I'll see a YouTuber or like a Let's Player that I'm like, I like this, and I'll subscribe. But like, it's not on a consistent basis. But I'm slowly trying to add that into my morning schedule.
Right. Nice. So what about as far as like things you would shake up or change for the next couple weeks? Anything that's standing out that you think is worth targeting?
Just more on like more small tweaks. So I think the read one a day, I started that like yesterday. So like I just am like, okay, let me like put this in and see how my mind likes it, adapts to it. Am I less stressed about it? Am I just like getting to my head, okay, reading one, and then that way when I read anything else or play a game or do whatever, it's like my mind's like, well, you've already read one manga today, or manga volume today, so we're good. So it's like I'm worrying less. So that and what else?
So I'll actually say on that so last week, our last podcast, I mentioned that I wanted to start listening to actual podcasts in Japanese, and I started doing that for like 30 minutes a night. But I started finding it's kind of boring because I'm not understanding enough of it to actually always follow the topics. So I was like, okay, it's not bad. Like I could keep going, but I was like, maybe there's something more comprehensible I could do. So what you're saying resonates with me. Like just the tiny optimizations. Maybe it's I shouldn't be listening to some podcasts because I don't have some specific podcast that I'm super motivated to listen to right now. So instead, I've been seeking out the YouTube route, which I've been watching like manga review videos of ones that I've already watched. So they'll put up like a panel on the screen, and be like talking about the plot for it or something. And then it's like, okay, well, I already know what's going on. I know the topic. I know the characters' names, so it's easier to follow. But then it still has kind of that podcasty feel, and that's something that I had to like internalize this week. I cognitively recognize was that it's not really the podcast I'm going after. I want to be able to understand audio-based things. And even if there are some visual hints on the screen, it's like, okay, well, I'm still getting like audio-based immersion for about 30 minutes a day. So that's one optimization I'm trying out.
Yeah. Okay, nice. I think that's good. I think, like you said, I feel like people can be hard on themselves, and I think the biggest, I think it's okay. It's okay to change our mind.
Yeah.
If we try something and it's just like, I find out that like you said, it's not working for me, or it's not as fun, or I'm not understanding as much. You make an adjustment, and you see how that is doing. And I think that is super important for life in general. Language learning or goals in general. It's just like you tried it, you didn't enjoy it, you tweaked it.
What about so you launched your first like fully edited video since the last one. How's that been? Good.
So I launched it. It was like where to read manga, and I felt like, I did some research on the topic, and it was just like, okay, like everyone talks about like how to read it, and I'm like, okay, that's important, but I feel like once we figure out, okay, how, it's just like, okay, well, where do we find it?
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, I don't see a lot of people talking about where they get their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, let me try to like fill that and provide value. And so that was fun. I even reached out to some people online who were looking. I think I was like just searching on Google, or not on Google, on Twitter, like people who were like, if you really just like search in the search bar. And I did that and found some people like, hey, where do you guys get manga? And I was like, oh, well, perfect.
Gotcha.
We'll slip in and be like, hey, I'm reading manga from here. I have more explanation on my YouTube video if you'd like to see it, and would post it. And so I got some people like, oh, wow, like, hey, that actually really helped. So like, yeah, it was good. It took a while so when I was doing it, the recording, the editing, the writing the script, that took longer than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
I think it took like a whole weekend of like me sitting down to do it. So I enjoyed it. I want to refine that process and just kind of keep, working on it. So it's hopefully streamlined.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was good.
That's awesome. So, I mean, actually it's interesting because so I watched it, and I watched it all the way through. It was good. I learned some things, that's for sure.
Thank you.
The thing that I took away from it, well, one of the things that I took away from it was just kind of it completely in a different direction, which was, okay, so if you haven't watched the end of the video, I won't spoil it for you, but there's a little Easter egg for you. And anytime language learners are using Japanese, there's always this thing that clicks in my brain that's like, oh man, are they using the right thing here? Is this actually Japanese? And it turns off whenever somebody's Japanese is on it. So somebody Japanese is speaking or something like that. But it made me think, okay, like is that the proper politeness level? Is that like, and I started running through these thoughts, and it's like, I realized from that, I was like, I'm not sure that I actually cognitively pay attention to like politeness levels in Japanese. I don't know what that is in English, or if there is some equivalent, but it made me think I should start paying attention to politeness levels in Japanese, because the specific thing that stuck out was you said something like Anki, and then you also said something like wasurimashita or something like that. So it was like the mas form. So I was like, can you do that? I don't know. So I went back to Gurren Lagann, and I was like, okay, I know they use Anki in there. I was like, okay, but then they don't use, like, that's teinego, right? So that's when you're using the mas form. And then I was like, okay, well, what's the opposite of teinego? And then I had to do some research to figure out like what that was. And it was like, okay, well, there's not actually a word for the opposite of teinego. It's like tameguchi is like one thing that is like the disrespectful, no politeness thing, but there's not like a strict thing for it, a strict word for it that kind of embodies it. But anyways, so that's like, so complete way off from what your topic was, but it inspired some other thoughts in my head of, so now when I've been watching anime, it's like, okay, this is like slice of life. What politeness level are they speaking to each other in? It was one of those things I had never paid attention to before, but I was wondering, like, what about you? Do you is politeness level something that you have started paying attention to?
So currently no, but when I lived abroad in Japan, I noticed that it wasn't until like my host family brought it up, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't know. Like, for example, it was like, I think we were talking about parents, and so I referred to my parents as okasan, otosan. And so the problem was that since my host family didn't know my parents, they were like, you would want to use like, haha, chichi, And I was like, wow, I didn't know. And so, but they knew that I was, my Japanese was self-taught, and they were like, wow, so this is some of the little nuances where like, we can tell that they were taught, or, so my two friends who were staying with me at the host family, they were like, well, yeah, we can tell that they were self-taught, or they were taught via classrooms, and you were taught like by yourself. And I'm like, oh wow, I didn't even think of that. And they're like, yeah. And so they were okay with it, but it was just kind of like, hey, this little tidbit of information. So like once they pointed that out, then I became more, cognizant of like, oh, okay, I need to use this, or I should use this.
Right. I mean, I worked in a Japanese company for 6 months, and I didn't really pay a whole bunch of attention to it. I just stuck to teinego. I mean, Genki kind of sets you up for that anyways. But like, yeah, you're talking about like the nuance between specific words. I mean, talking about things that aren't even verbs and them having like different politeness levels and that sort of stuff. And it's like, I don't think I would have picked up on that either, honestly. I feel like even if you immerse a ton, there's little nuance that you miss. And that kind of leads us into our next topic, which is the monolingual transition.
Oh yeah.
So I guess first off, I consider myself to have made the monolingual transition. What about yourself, Jordan?
Man, it's a hit or miss. Tips. So yes, but I guess I'm not feeling as how I thought I was gonna feel when you make it. It's not like oh man, I get everything, I understand it all. Oh, it's like, and so I'm just like, wait, I think we all think of this magic, and so I didn't get that magic. But yes,
it's the same thing with. I think Map vs. Japan has talked about fluency quite a bit and what it feels like, and that I think naively when a lot of us start, you think of it as a light bulb that clicks at some point, and it's not. It's a long uphill battle that eventually it's like, well, I understood most of whatever's being said, and it's enough at this point to feel like I actually know what people are talking about. So at least that's still my understanding of it, and my understanding from working in a company with people talking to me all the time. It's like I still don't consider myself fluent, but it's like, okay, I get that. I get monolingual transition. It's like I can read definitions for the most part, understand them, and every once in a while still fall back to English for specific reasons that we can kind of talk about. But I guess for you, what was how did you start?
I started. I was really like trying to find ways to make it easier, because for whatever reason, I always thought, like you said, it was like a light bulb. It was a click that like, oh, I just start now, right? I just do it, right? And so I've tried that and it didn't work well. So I've tried it a few times and it was like I was really scared and it not making sense. And so I remember, so my first experience with it was, so there's a guy, his name's Adam. He runs a site called Japanese Level Up.
That was the one that turned me onto it too.
Yeah, and so he talked about it, and he made his own deck for cars. So he has his own Anki decks where he sells. And so I think I was a part of the community in the beginning, and so he was like, "Hey, you've been a part of the community," and I reached out to him and I was like, "Hey, I'm trying to make this monolingual transition. It's not really going as planned. What do I do?" And he's like, "You've been a part of the community for a while. I'm gonna send you one of the decks, and you just kind of use it and see how you like it." And so it was like 1,000 cards, intermediate, and so I did it. I think I completed most of it or all of it, and that was really like, oh wow, okay, I really see how it helps. But it still was I still was fuzzy in certain areas. So, and I think, and in hindsight, I know now that it was like I was focusing more on the Anki part more than the like immersion and enjoying it. So yeah, that was the first instance. And then I know Map vs. Japan made a video about talking how to make it simpler, make it easy. And I tried that and that worked as well. And then now I think it's just more of, like you said, it's a process. I'll look up a word in a Japanese to Japanese dictionary. If I get it and understand it, great. If I don't, I'll go to immediately either to English, or I'll try one or two more sites depending on how much time I have. And then from there, it's like a slow, like, okay, I've always thought it was like oh man, there it is.
Yeah.
You get it, it clicks.
Or that, I mean, the other thing for me was just like, well, I mean, I could always just do this when I'm fluent. But it's like, well, that's so that was one of the things that drew me into it is like, okay, this is actually more time in whatever my target language is, so Japanese. So it's like, surely that's good for you. Also, I still had the idea that that about like thinking in your target language is what you want to be doing. So it was like, okay, well, it seems like if I'm supposed to be thinking in this language, I need to be able to understand other words in this language too, which Matt vs. Japan also made a really good video on that topic as well, about how it's really, well, eventually you're thinking it's not really you're not going through the narrative in your head or something like that, which speaks the language. It goes directly to mental ease. Not something to go into today, but that topic of mental ease has helped me in quite a few different areas, especially reading, actually, for like just think about make it smoother, getting the words into mental ease, that sort of thing. So I mean, that's kind of shows, I guess, the start of it, where it was kind of, you know, I'm just trying to think in this language, but then more of moving to, well, it's just, you need to be able to absorb it more Japanese and convert it to mental ease faster. So that's that's kind of where I was at with it. But I took actually the same steps that you did. I used one of those Japanese level up decks, and it was specifically geared towards the monolingual transition. So it taught a couple of those dictionary gotcha words that aren't used in anywhere else, essentially.
Right.
So it was, I think I started with that back in 2018, and then exactly like you said, I did the same thing. Honestly, it was, I started watching a bunch of Matt vs. Japan videos at the beginning of 2019, because that's when I had it was a click moment for me for this part, where it was like, whatever my study method is, it's not working. And that's when I found channels about ajatt and that sort of thing. So so going from there, there was the video about, like, I think Matt uses Colibri, right? But then it was in one of the comments, somebody mentioned Golden Dict, which is another dictionary program similar to you know, what people used before MIA made the Anki dictionary and stuff for that. So I guess before we jump into any further, because I feel like my workflow is quite a bit different than what people's probably is, because I established it. I established it really like before the tools existed that a lot of people are using now. And I think you mentioned you actually did switch over to like the MIA dictionary. Like, so what are you using? Like, what's your monolingual workflow these days?
So typically, it's the MIA the dictionary add-on. I typically use that. I've used Colibri before. What else have I used? Sanseido, I think that's another one. Like Weblio, but yeah, right now, currently, that is like the dictionary add-on, and it has like, I have a separate, like, one mode for English, one mode for Japanese.
Okay.
So it's, you know, set in Japanese. I'll look at it, and then what's nice about the dictionary add-on is it has like stars on like how frequent a word,
the frequency
is.
thing,
so, right, and so it's like, okay, if it's like doesn't have too many, you know, stars, or the definition is very like not concrete, or it's not making sense, then I will go to the English and see what it is. And you know, then, you know, even sometimes I'll look at the English and I'm like, oh, okay, I get the Japanese definition now. And then I'll sometimes then still put the Japanese definition. And then I'll typically add audio of some sort to the card as well, whether it's just how the word is pronounced, or if I've got the audio for the entire sentence, you know, even better. And then that's, what else?
And so as you're adding stuff to Anki, are you making cards as you look these up, or is that a separate process?
That's a separate process. Okay. Typically.
Same for me.
Yeah. So only time I think I've recently have been doing more of, like, if I'm watching anime, I will. So Matt did Matt vs. Japan did another video on like how to mine from shows from Netflix, and so like
that was a recent
I got all that set up, and I was like, oh, whoa, this is actually pretty, you know, seamless almost. It takes a few seconds, you know, to make one, and so I'll do those. But if it's like for manga or anything I find online, if it's like online, I actually have a Google Doc that I'm like, oh wait, I
Okay.
like this sentence. I'll copy it and put it in the Google Doc, and then eventually, at some later point, I'll try to add it to Anki. And then for manga, I'll just write it down. If I'm like, okay, I've seen this word more than once, I'll write it down so then I can put it in Anki. I might look a word up if I'm like, wait, I just want to see what this means for the plot, or hey, I think I know what this means. I'll look it up, and I might not add that at all. But typically, if I'm reading, I won't. If I'm in the thick of it, in the wild, I will not add, to Anki right then and there.
Yeah. So, same here. I also have, so I'm using Google Sheets, which is just the spreadsheet version, and then each one gets a line, and I'll just be chucking stuff in there. I guess, so a couple questions about your actual workflow there. So as far as, there are a bunch of dictionaries that you use inside of the MIA one, right? Do you have any like favorites in there? Are you ordering them in a specific way?
Yeah, I think what is it? Daijirin?
Yeah.
That's the one I like.
Same. That's my top one as well.
Yeah, and then Forvo for sounds, but like as far as like any other dictionary, Daijirin is typically the one I shoot for, because I'm like, oh well, what was it? I think Daijirin, you can add it to the Kindle, and I like it on that as well.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I think this is good, and I think I've used it also on my iPad before, and so I'm just like, yeah, this is bread and butter. This seems like it works.
Yeah.
And go from there.
So so you mentioned Sanseido, which, in looking up some information for this topic, Sanseido is the publishing company that makes daijirin. So So I use so it's called super daijirin. So it's the super version apparently, and that's whatever. I got it from this old Matt vs. Japan video where everybody else gets it, but it was, I think, so those were in that Epwing format, right? Which is the standard Japanese dictionary format, and that's also what Golden Dict can use as well. So I think right now they convert them into a different format, but I'm not sure, because I've never actually used the MIA dictionary because my workflow worked, so I didn't really want to go and figure out something else, invest in a bunch of tools when basically I don't. It's one of those things I could potentially look into optimizing, but I think so. I'll run through a couple things here. So first off, Golden Dict, it's written in C++. Okay, so, or maybe even C. I don't remember, but it's a C-based language, and which is good because compared to Python, there are some. It's easier to do like asynchronous things in C++ typically. I work at a Python shop, so we can definitely do like async, and the Python people I talk to get mad when you say like, oh, it's more difficult to, because Python is the perfect language according to them, but it's different tools for different purposes, right? So I find it first off to be really snappy as far as like a dictionary program, so I liked it. The issue is it doesn't get updated that much, but that's honestly been fine with me because Anki it's been getting a lot of updates, which is good.
Yeah.
But things have been breaking because this whole add-on ecosystem is kind of fragile. The way that you actually plug into these, as someone who has written Anki add-ons, they break a lot. And whenever you want to update your Anki, it's like, oh, well, I got to go check through 20 different things and make sure that my vital flow is still working, right? The other thing for me that I found with Anki in general, and why I'm not really too keen to moving over to the MIA one, is because there are I have a lot of Anki cards. Okay, so we'll talk about Anki at some other point, but I have essentially this massive sentence bank of all these different cards from like subs to series and that sort of things, of series that I've either watched or games that I'm going to play or have played. And so I have 800,000 cards in there, and it keeps growing. Yeah, it keeps growing. So apparently, when you add that many decks, Anki starts to take up more and more RAM on your computer. So it's like it now takes like 3 gigs of RAM for me to run Anki. So it's like I could change that, like I could, but it's like, well, it's the flow that's working for me already. So I'm not super motivated to change that when it's working. So instead of having Anki running all the time, which I assume is how this MIA add-on works, it's just I just have this dictionary running in the background, and it takes like 190 megabytes of actual RAM. On top of that, there were some other things, like, so I also initially looked at Calibri, but for whatever reason, it was using an old QtPy. I think that's what it was using, QtPy framework, which is essentially the UI layer. And it was using a version that didn't play well with like Windows DPI settings, if I remember correctly, which means that basically you can't upscale the resolution to your proper screen. So text ends up looking like jagged. It's not a deal breaker. Like it's perfectly usable, but I didn't have that issue in Golden Dict. So it's like, if I'm going to be staring at this thing for hundreds of hours, like at least make it look a little pretty, right?
Fair.
So I mean, those are super superficial things, super superficial. But it kind of was like, okay, well, let me just try out Golden Dict. And then it was kind of from there I started, like, I didn't have anybody else developing, MIA dictionaries at that time weren't a thing. So I was like, okay, well, what is actually missing from this? So one of the things that I had a lot of difficulty with in transitioning monolingually was I was like, dang, jisho is so convenient because you can just slap full sentences in there. And it'll just, essentially normalize all of them into whatever Japanese words, and you can look up anything if it's conjugated any which way. So it's like, that's pretty darn convenient. And naturally, Japanese people, like, that's a great feature for a learner. It's not a great feature for a native speaker, or at least it's not nearly as practical. I wouldn't expect that at an English dictionary site for me to be slapping full sentences in there. But anyways, there's that. So that was one of those things that like held me back initially, is I would just be like OCRing manga with capture to text, which would just rip out little chunks of text. And then I would just be putting that into jisho, and it would just tell me, oh, I can click any which word, and that was convenient, right? But the issue there, obviously, is jisho only has bilingual translations, right? Translating your Japanese into English. So moving away from that, it was like, okay, well, I've got the monolingual dictionary here. All that's missing is this little piece to, normalize whatever Japanese words are in there. So I wrote a small like script. So being a programmer, I was like, oh, I can actually probably solve this. So I actually made something that just grabs that bar and basically it does the same thing. Basically, I'm not using like mecab or some sort of offline thing, but I'm using the same sources that jisho would be using on this. So so using that and then just slapping that bar. So Golden Dict has a feature inside of it that allows you to essentially call a different program and then use that as your dictionary. Okay. So basically, you put in whatever word you want into your dictionary, and it will send it off to your program. So it's a programmer's dream come true, honestly, that they actually have a proper API built. Unlike honestly, like Anki, which is just, it's very open to its flaws, as people have seen when you update things, and it can be really difficult to. So with that problem out of the way, I can actually do things like, take a word or a sentence and then put that inside my monolingual dictionary. I don't need to have all the English definitions there, and then I can just click on whichever one that I want inside of that, and it will, show the monolingual definitions associated with it. So I guess, go ahead.
So how does that work for like conjugated words?
It deconjugates them. So okay, actually, to be accurate, jisho does that sort of thing, right? Like they deconjugate it, and it's called the Zen bar there. And so like you'll have a conjugated word, you click that, and then it will show the deconjugated one. And then if the conjugated word isn't found in your monolingual dictionary, like jisho still shows that little Zen bar, and you can just click on that. And that's why I called it like I made it, and this I'm not trying to push some product here, but this is for sale on my Patreon, because I mean I literally have used it for a year and a half, but like that thing is it's something that you can just click and keep clicking. So that's why I was calling it the Zen Golden Dict, like Zen add-on or something like that, because it's like, okay, well, if it's conjugated, click again. Oh, now it changed its form to its most common form that Jisho knows about, so click on that again. And it's kind of I don't know how to describe it if you haven't done it, but it's you keep going into it, and it gets you into this little Zen flow. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah. No, it's funny, when I was using, I think Qualby, I can't remember how to pronounce, but
Calibri, something like that. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. I can't remember if, I don't think it handled conjugations well.
It didn't.
I believe
that was another thing.
Yeah,
but Golden Dict doesn't either. That was the thing.
Yeah. So what I had to do something similar at first. I would put it into Jisho, and then without looking at the definition, I would just grab the conjugated versions and then put it back.
Yeah.
And so that was another reason why I was like, okay, this workflow is pretty shitty, and I wasn't happy. And so when it came out with the dictionary add-on, I was like, let me try it. And I saw some videos, and I was like, oh, whoa, okay, this blows everything I have out of the water. I'm gonna move over.
That's one of those things, like eventually, like if you're a fresh beginner, like deconjugating is like, I think probably pretty critical. But then like you do get to a certain point where it's like, well, it's either gonna be, it's a verb, so it's either ending with like oo or ru. So like you're gonna you can guess those if you wanted to, but now luckily with the MIA one or something like the Zen add-on, like you don't have to. So so that's convenient. So the other thing, so again, like I made that, which I'm guessing there's nothing quite like, what happens if you put a sentence into the MIA dictionary? It just doesn't do anything.
It'll try to search for the whole sentence.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's like, okay, no results found.
Sure. So then the next piece that I added onto Golden Dict as well was golden images, which is essentially, it just gets a bunch of images for whatever that word is. And I know that was I'm pretty sure that's one of the features that the MIA dictionary launched with as well.
Yeah, it is.
And so I was like, oh wow, okay, well, I'm glad that I already, I essentially set up my own thing in a way that like other people are also kind of like naturally inclined to go towards. It kind of is reaffirmation that this is very useful, because it's one of those things, like with images, like I add them to like all of my Anki cards, so I knew if I could have like Google Images going at the same time as just another dictionary, essentially, that's going to help you internalize words even faster than if you could actually read them monolingually.
Do you put your pictures on the front or the back of your cards?
Always the back.
Okay. Yeah.
We should
agreed.
We should get into Anki, and maybe that'll be one of our next episodes, because I got plenty of weird things in my monolingual flow, and I got way more and probably in my Anki workflow.
Yeah.
So let's see, what else? So I had those two things, and then I also just like so again, like you can script it yourself. So and you can do this as well with the MIA one. Like you could write your own, like it's all open source, so there's no reason somebody couldn't do something like what I'm about to describe. But you in monolingual definitions, sometimes they will still have English words, especially daijirin, like comes up a lot with like, oh, here's also the English definition, and it's like, okay, well, I thought I was doing this monolingually, but every once in a while I'll put one in, and your eye's going to be automatically drawn into that English one. So I also added some small thing that just looks for a keyword that is in that text and will essentially remove any sort of English definitions besides to your English dictionary. So that way it's more conscious when you're switching between a Japanese one and an English one. Similar to, like you said, you can switch between an English workflow and a Japanese workflow, it sounded like.
Correct. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's where I'm at with it. It works. I would say the disadvantages are like again, like I'm writing this stuff myself and basically for myself. So it's like if something breaks on it, I have to go fix it. But at the and then the downside is, like I said, I'm actually like I have it up so that other people can get it, but I'm not giving it away for free. Blame that on my me making a living off of software engineering. I don't feel too bad about asking to be compensated for work. But
no, that's fair.
Yeah. So the I guess I would say the thing with I know I don't really need to go into that, but the yeah the MIA stuff as far as it goes right now, like I said, it's hooked into the Anki stuff as well. So that I feel like that's a double-edged sword, right? Because it's like people already have it, so that's really great. But at the same time, like I could write my own extension as far as Golden Dict to do things like add it to your Anki card. But it's like I'm not sure. So I guess I would ask you the functionality to move things from your dictionary to an Anki card. How useful is that to you? Because I just copy and paste that. Is it like, can you describe, like, as someone who doesn't use it, can you describe that to me?
Yeah, it's I think I like it a lot. I because it's really easy to set up, and it's typically based on like the type of card you have.
Yeah.
So like, for example, let's say I have a definition, it'll explain the definition, and it'll have little buttons on the side to the definition. So it's like definition here, and it's like a small little taskbar up top. And if I click a button, it'll send it to the field, like to the meaning field of this specific card.
Yeah.
But like it's set for, like I said, you can set it up based on the type of card you have. So if you have like a type of card for Japanese or a type of card for, the one who's person who's doing like a medical, if you have that type set up, it's almost instantaneous. It's just you click a button, boom, click a button, boom. And then for the audio, because it'll have like, it goes to Forva, I think.
Yeah.
Forvo.
Yeah.
And it has several different audios. So you just click the one you want. You click a checkbox, it selects the one you want, and then you click another button, and it'll send it over to your card again. So it's very simple. It's very like, not too much thought processes involved. But I feel like, again,
so
it's like
that's another advantage. Yeah, that Forvo piece. Yeah, because like Golden Dict, a Golden Dict, you can integrate it with Forvo, but it's not gonna like send that to your like Anki card and make that convenient piece for you. So that is a nice thing. In the past, I had been using like there was text to speech, which is okay. And then there was also like now I think there's like a Google API text to speech thing that's kind of a beta thing with Anki that you can use. Yeah. I haven't really been using that very much just because I've been doing so many subs to SRS cards though. So I typically won't do. I'll typically just have full sentence audio on there these days. Though in the past I generated all them for all of my vocab words as well.
Yeah.
So one other thing I was going to ask, as far as like your monolingual flow, like adding cards, or I'm sorry, adding those definitions to your Anki cards. What's that process like? Like I know you said you're taking the full definition. Are you doing anything as far as like chopping it down, or it like if it's like Hikaru, are you are you doing like
so
what do you do with that?
What's nice is you can also, so what I've noticed, and this is just me like playing around with it, the same thing like you said, if it sometimes with definitions you'll get like 10 and it's just like I don't want all those, or only the first 2 make sense,
right? So
you can highlight that selection of like the first 2 and then click the arrow and it'll only send over what you selected. So I'm just like,
so you can still select things and then send over just the selection. Interesting.
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
That was actually one of the questions I asked on the Matt vs. Japan Patreon around specifically like, hey, do you cut these down? Because like you said, for the Japanese level up ones, it's the bare minimum. You need to understand that word in that context. So you're actually missing out on a lot of other things that would be in the monolingual definition. right?
Right.
So have you played around with both of those? Do you have a preference for which one you prefer?
I typically, it's like a hybrid. Sometimes I'll put the whole thing, because like there'll be multiple meanings. Or sometimes I will just put what I need. To be honest, I think, and that's what I've been really leaning into.
Yeah.
It's just like, what do I need to make sense? Because Anki for me is already like, a burden and can be. And so I'm just like, I just kind of want to get in and get out. And so
adding a wall of text isn't always conducive to getting in and getting out.
Exactly. And then I sometimes, it's been getting better, but I sometimes will be like, I'll try to go as fast as I can to get things done.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, slow down. And I notice that like I'll read a card, I'll know the word, and I'm like, I wasn't paying attention to that sentence in any way, shape, or form. So I've noticed if I slow it down, it's like it makes more sense, and I feel like it's sinking in more than like, let me just go light speed.
You're talking about the actual card making process, that doing it a bit more cognitively.
Oh no, I mean for my reviewing.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So when I if I add smaller sentences or sentences with like less definitions, it's like when I'm reviewing, if I have to read it, it's not as much of a slog as if there were like, let me look for that sentence that I know I understand in this card. It's like, okay, it's right here. It's simple. It's sweet.
That was my exact mindset as well, and that's why I asked, because Matt does the opposite. Where he adds in the full definition. And I was like, I mean, the most frustrating part of doing an Anki review is when you miss it and then have to review it, and then that takes time. And it's like, wouldn't you want that to be as streamlined as possible, where you have the smallest definition possible? So I was exactly in that mindset. And Matt's response, if I remember right, it was something to the effect of, yeah, but there's a lot of context there that you may not be ready for right now, but that you could eventually grasp whenever you review it again later, that you missed it, that can help you like internalize it even more so. So I was like, you know what? I might as well try it. So I moved into that suggestion from doing like bare minimums to doing like full chunks, and also making sure that I'm actually reading those full chunks as much as possible. I don't want to be too hypocritical, because I do sometimes just skip quite a few of them, but I will, add the full thing in there, move it over. And honestly, I realized after doing it, it's really minutia, but it was something that had bugged me. So it's working.
I try to do 1 to 3. 1 to 3 is my like, okay, 1 to 3 sentences. Or I mean, like if there's like 5, I might like the first one and the fourth one. So I'll just like have to like copy and, that's one time where it's just like, oh, I have to copy and paste manually more than sending it over. But like, I feel like,
Are you talking about separate dictionary entries? Like you're taking from multiple? Okay.
No. So it'll be the same. Like for one word, I'll have multiple dictionary entries, but it on the same card.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have noticed that like sometimes like down the line I'll read this definition and I'm like, oh wow, I actually know that one even though I didn't know it before. So like I can kind of see it, but like it isn't until like you see it like way in advance, and in between that you seeing it, it's just like your immersion is like where it needs to be.
Yeah. I think you've already kind of touched on this a couple times, that like as far as the monolingual transition goes, like the reason we're even doing it is because we want to pick up more nuance and be in the language more, have a better understanding of it. But I had a interesting realization the other day, because it was again, Matt vs. Japan keeps coming up a lot, but the Twitter, he made a post on Twitter about that there's no word for procrastination in Japanese, something to that effect. And
I remember you commented.
Yeah, and the thing that stuck out to me is that so what I posted on there was, well, but this is actually like, if you read the monolingual definition, it's like that is what that means there. It's like, what are you missing? And he responded in kind that it's like, there's still nuance there that isn't there, right? The idea of the psychology behind it. But
Mm-hmm.
what it made me realize is that, okay, even if you understand something monolingually, you still don't get all of the nuance of the word.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
had a similar experience, like at almost the same time, where I posted some word. I don't even remember what the word was. And one of my Japanese friends was like, oh, this actually has like a kind of childish meaning to it. And it's like, well, in the
Mm.
monolingual definition, like I don't see that at all. But it's
Yeah.
like, so
Yeah.
it's like, even if you're doing the monolingual transition, it's not going to replace you seeing that words thousands of times
Yeah.
in thousands of different contexts. So it's like,
Yeah. Or even just like reading it. I feel like reading it in books or watching it in shows. It isn't until like I feel like you're in it. You're in a conversation and it comes up, and
yeah.
you're like, oh, whoa, hold on, like you know.
And along that line, like sentences versus definitions. I know that was
Yeah.
the anti-moon thing, that those guys were all about reading your stuff in sentences. And a lot of times when I'm reading through a dictionary definition, it's like I'll just read the definition and skip the example sentence. But it's really those sentences actually tend to be pretty useful too. So I'm trying to train myself to just read a little
Hmm.
bit more there and also pick up those
Yeah.
sentences, because
Yeah.
I think those can be probably even more effective than hearing about a word in the abstract. Because again, the point
Right.
of any immersion based learning is to actually do the real thing, right? So
Right. Yeah.
pulling it in through sentences is probably better. So you mentioned still like falling back to English. Uh, I've had a few interesting thoughts on that recently as well. So it's like the idea of a definition versus a translation. Well, so
Mm.
one thing that I noticed is that like when we're doing monolingual things, like yeah, we're reading through definitions of these words, which are multiple sentences, right? And then you look at something like a translation of it, and it's just one word. So not
Right.
only do you already understand it, but it's also a shortcut, right? So
Hmm.
naturally, I felt like that's one of the things that I've recognized now of why it's difficult to do this monolingual translation, is this distinction between definitions versus translations.
Yeah.
Well, so one of the things that I've started being aware of is that when you're going through some manga and you want to understand it quickly, it's like, okay, yeah, I could get a translation of that word. And that's I feel like that's a good thing. I feel like a lot of people have covered this already, that if it's like a one-to-one translation of like a scientific word or something, or an animal for instance, it's like, well, yeah, you can skip to the English and I don't think you're really missing out on that much.
Right.
You
Right.
could read a definition about what a skunk is, but
Yeah.
it's
When you
like,
see it,
yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
oh, okay.
Probably you already got it from the image, but yeah, you
Right.
can the difference there again being translations versus definitions, and kind of knowing when to exploit either one of them.
Hmm.
What about you? Like, when do you find yourself falling back to English?
Um, it's typically like for example, so in the video you mentioned how at the end, I had the little scene at the end, and
Hmm.
so translating that, like I was like first time like actually adding subtitles to things,
Right.
and so like that was like more nerve wracking than I felt like it needed to be,
Hmm.
but like it was like what is it like the word like there are certain words that like the translation, but I'm like that doesn't make sense or like
Yeah.
that's not right,
Yes.
like like I does it like that one, like because I used it and I was like, oh
Hmm.
snap, wait, how do I like because it can be used in multiple different,
Yeah.
there's no like, oh, it means this specifically all the time.
Yep.
And so I'm just like, wait, hold on. And then it always I feel like it's translated to like something completely
Hmm.
different, because in English I feel like there's more nuances or there's I feel like, and maybe this is incorrect, but I feel like in English sometimes there's like more ways to express the same thing. There's
Hmm.
different ways, whether it's slang or just, you know, just different ways to say it, you
Mhm.
know. And so like in Japanese, there's maybe I'm thinking less of that, and so
You
it's
see less
you know
flexibility in it.
yeah, it's very like not you know with English it's like yo you can it's like a wet noodle you can do whatever you want with it, and so this is
So
very like
do you think that's actually the language, or is that just your level with the language? Like, do
I
you have?
know that yeah that's what I'm not too sure on,
Sure.
you know, that's why I'm
Yeah.
just like is this me or is
Yeah.
this just the way it is.
I remember thinking that exact thing in like my first semester of Japanese classes. And I was like, wow, this it seems like there's a lot of limitations in this. Whereas, like you said, English is a wet noodle. I can do anything I want with it. But
Right.
I feel like the deeper I get in, the more it's like, oh man, they have so many weird ways to say so many different things that maybe it is just me. I honestly don't know, but because I'm
Mhm.
still not fluent, so we'll see. What about so so talking about like falling back into English? Uh, Well, I guess first off, I still feel like I do it when either I'm
Mhm.
in a rush or I'm lazy.
Yes.
The laziness part is probably where it comes in a lot. It's like, okay, well, I've kind of skimmed through this monolingual definition. I skimmed through this monolingual definition, and before I know it, so I have them all. My dictionaries arranged with like English at the bottom. So if like I
Yeah.
break through all my layers, then I get to English. But I've definitely found myself quite a few times just being like, yeah, well, I'm just going to skip to the English as fast as possible. So this is another one of those things that I've been trying to be aware of is like when what is the trigger that makes me want to skip down to the English?
Right.
And again, I think it's a lot of just laziness. Like it's like it's more effort to do it the quote unquote right way.
Mhm.
So one rule I've made for myself is that before you skip to the English, you have to at least try to guess what it means from the context.
Right.
So I found that to be very helpful because
Yeah.
I think when I was starting, like even this is even before Ajatt, I was doing like playing I think a Pokemon Sun and Moon. That was I think the first video game I played through in Japanese.
Oh
And
wow. Okay.
I was going through it and I was just looking up words in jisho nonstop. Like, oh, don't know what this word, look it up. And it becomes a really fast loop of you understanding things out of context, really,
Mhm.
because you don't have that kind of monolingual context around it that's in that same language. Moving that over to something like trying to do that same thing in Japanese with monolingually, you again still have that temptation, even if you have all those dictionaries in front of you, that it's like I just want to skip down to that English as fast as possible. So that's been one of those challenges is okay, well, recognize first off that you don't know this word, and then that you also need to be effortful. I feel like in your brain to say this is what this thing means here, right?
Mhm.
That was one of those things I learned from I think the book was yeah, it was definitely Make It Stick, where they were talking about basically how does your brain, like what's the most efficient way to, as the title says, make it stick. And if you don't
Right.
have any effort in trying to understand what it means, your brain is not going to keep that connection as long, is what they said in
Mhm.
that. So simply by putting forth the effort to understand consciously and not just jumping to, oh, what's this mean, oh, what's this mean,
Right.
it actually makes it
Right.
stick better in your brain. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's where I'm at with that.
No. Yeah. I feel like I've yeah. You hit the nail right on the head because I feel like I like noticed that as well. I think that was the one thing where I was like, okay, doing 20 a day with my current workflow and schedule is a little is tough.
Hmm.
But going back to 10 and then slowing it down and just really trying to be like, okay, let me really do I really know, or maybe let it, like you said, let it sink in.
Hmm.
And doing that I feel like has helped the
Hmm.
process smooth and easier. Or when I look up stuff, I don't have to. It's not a compulsion to know what it means immediately. It's
Hmm.
like okay, I don't have to, or like you said, pick it out by
Hmm.
context.
That's one of the things that they really reinforce in that book is that we naturally have a inclination to avoid struggle, right? But actually
Yes.
your brain, like whatever that struggle is, that's what helps it stick. So
Hmm.
so yeah, I would just encourage anybody kind of dealing with that as well, that if you're struggling with it, monolingual
Yeah.
transition, trying to figure out how to it's you just keep struggling with it. You
Yeah.
keep at it,
Yeah.
try to guess what it means from the context and from even the monolingual definitions before you even look at an English definition.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things that has helped me.
Yeah. Same. I think I used to put a hint of English on it. Like, oh, I used to like have it where it's just like, okay, the English would be there
Mhm.
in case I needed it,
Mhm.
but I felt like I defaulted to that, so
Mm.
I removed it. And so typically, like, and this sometimes happens, like I'll understand the definition like today,
Yeah.
and then tomorrow I'm just like, wait, I don't know if I remember
Yeah.
this, or like next week, and so like I'll try to
Because you
continue
looked at the
on.
English already?
No, sometimes just like,
Okay,
if
just
if I'm like, "Oh, I
monolingually.
get it," and then later on, I'm like, "Wait, did I get that
Mm.
really? Like,
Yeah.
was I going too fast?" And so I sometimes during that will look up the English and then be like, "Oh, okay, cool," and then I'll go back to the Japanese.
Mhm.
So, you know, I don't know if that's necessarily the best way, but like I feel like if it's really bothering me or bugging me, it's just like,
Mhm.
man, let's say even in the interval, it's just like, oh, it's like a month, and I'm like, wait, I should know
Yeah,
this. Like
I've
I
had
know how
that.
to read it, and I know how to say it, but I don't know if I know, what it
Yeah.
means. And so just that quick glance, I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
now this all makes sense now.
Mhm.
Okay. And so, I feel like I try not to beat myself up for those, small instances because
Mhm.
it's like, everybody else in the world, is beating me up for whatever. And so it's just like, why am I going to beat myself up?
Yeah, yeah. That's so I thought you were touching on something there that I've dealt with, which is I do have like translation sometimes on the card in hint
Yeah.
fields. So it's completely hidden even when I flip the
Yeah.
card. But it's like it's already on the card, so if I needed to, I could double check it just to reinforce the context. But I
Yeah.
have found that sometimes I will rely on that too much. Like maybe when I was making the card, I read that like right away for some reason, and it's like, oh yeah, well if I read the monolingual definition with the English definition still like sticking around in my head, this makes sense to me. But then I'll be reviewing
Yeah.
my card and it'll be like, oh, read through the monolingual definitions. I don't even know what all the words in here mean anymore. I can't know what this
Yeah.
definition is. And then it's like, oh,
Yeah.
so I guess I'll peek at the English again. And then that's kind of a cycle. So that's one of the
Hmm.
things that other things that I've recognized is that when you're making your monolingual cards, like make sure you really understand the definition
Right.
because
Yeah.
you might have
Yeah.
little bits of English still peeking in and you might not really even understand it. It might not be your
Hmm.
I+1 word.
Right. Right. Yeah. Agreed.
So, any other points on the monolingual transition you've thought about, or anything else
Um,
still peeking around in there? I think we probably covered it
yeah,
pretty thoroughly.
I feel like for those listening, it's a transition. Do not expect it to be a snap, like everyone's magic, or like, I feel like my therapist talks about this all the time. She's like, you look for a lot of magic. You look for like, when you want something to like when I'm cognizant of like, okay, I need to fix X.
Hmm.
Cool. I'm gonna fix it and everything's gonna be great. And it's like boom, bam, bam, it is done. But it's just like that is not how life works. And like transitions work, or like when you do something for so long, it's just like you don't automatically just like you're done.
Hmm.
So it's a transition. Take the time. I think, you know, looking it up in the monolingual definition first. And I even think I might do this like you just said, put your English at the bottom. Try these different things. Once you've tried them, it's just like if you're not getting it, it's okay to look up the English and just kind of slowly but surely it will start to click. It will
It's
start
also
to make
okay
sense.
just to not look at the English at all and not understand the word. I think that's also
Yeah,
another
yeah,
option. Like just get used to the ambiguity. Sometimes if you can't understand it monolingually, it's not worth understanding right now.
yeah, yeah. I'm getting better at ambiguity, because that is
Yeah.
something where I'm just like,
It's
what
critical.
do I do? Or
It's the most vital skill probably to language learning, at least one of them, one of the top
agreed.
ones.
Yeah.
So as far as, I mean, how long do you feel like you've been working on the monolingual transition? Do you have any idea when you started? 'Cause I started in 2018 at the end, and I was already at a functional point, and then it's been a year and some change, a year and 9 months of immersing. I'm not sure when, like, I think on the MIA website, they actually were bold enough to claim that, like, at a certain percentage level, this is when you can consider to be like monolingual, which is super helpful to people. But it's also like impossible to gauge. Like, I'm not keeping track of how many times I'm actually jumping to English, but it just feels like less. So that's why it's like, I don't know when the monolingual transition happened in the last. It probably took a year though. Like, I would think it took a year of me just immersing with Japanese content and using a Japanese dictionary through that whole time until it really felt like it. So I'm curious, you have any idea how long you've been chugging at it?
So the Japanese level up thing that happened like a few years back, at least like 4.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like when I like committed to it and stuck with it was probably like a year or two ago, is when I was like, okay, I think I should at least a year, because I think it was around the time like last year I took the JLPT and 2, and then like afterwards I was like, okay, after this JLPT, like I didn't do monolingual because I was like, I need to study for this test, and I kind of need to know what these words mean, to pass the test. So, but it was like around last year, December, and I was like, okay, I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to continue to do this. And yeah, I just think it was just has been a process. And then like, as I really like, in May, I read like 40 volumes of manga, and I was like, oh, okay, this is all starting to connect now. Okay, I think I get what's happening now. This is making more sense. This is sinking in. So, yeah.
Yeah, so multi-year probably for for folks like you and me.
Yeah, I think it was, and again, I think it all boils down to like immersion and like not the Anki stats. And I think Anki does help, for sure. But I think there was this, and I want to say this, there was this one guy, I saw his YouTube video, so I'm super interested in like hearing other people or seeing other people's journeys. So I'll like watch someone's video, and there was this guy named Stu, and he is also learning Japanese. He didn't make the transition, but he seems like he's very knowledgeable, and he can, I think he can, I'm going based off his word, but it seems like he didn't make the transition because I guess he's strictly focused on really like conversational. So he's not really reading at all. Like, not like your typical reading. He might read like a subtitle file and pick out words from that and like put that in Anki. But as far as like him going out of his way to like read, like, oh, I'm gonna sit down and read manga, he doesn't. So I was like, whoa, that's a whole nother approach that I've never even thought about, but it's possible. But yeah, I think it really depends on, immersion.
So he just doesn't do like monolingual stuff at all from what you saw, or
he does it a little bit. It's sprinkled in, but it's not like, I think it does click more when you do reading, and he mentions that, and he's like, yeah, I think it'll make more sense, or I'll start to do it once I start reading. But I think he's a full-time, works full-time like us. I think he has a wife and a kid or kids. So it's just like, he can't necessarily do that.
Yeah, right. Like it's all about life balance. Everybody's a little different. Yeah.
Right.
So let's go ahead and jump into the chat. I also just realized that this whole time I've had the title on Twitch wrong, which it's not too big of a deal, but I'm gonna update that real quick. So today in chat again, we're talking about, so if you're on Twitch, you can chat and it will show up on our screen. This is usually the part where we talk about recommendations. If you guys have any questions about what we just talked about, we can also address those now as well. So if you are in chat, feel free to post something. As far as recommendations, like content that you've been immersing with, we kind of already talked about it at the beginning. You mentioned like The Promised Neverland, still making some progress there.
Right.
Anything else that you've been diving into, or content that you would recommend for people?
I'm gonna let you go first because
Okay.
I gotta think.
Yeah. Think about it. So I've got. I was thinking about again. My all-time favorite J dramas, which I haven't brought up yet. So the first one, actually, I found out from Jake vs. Japan on Twitter, and it was Kyou Orewa, which he mentioned the manga or had some post for it, and I was like, what is this? And learned from him what it was. It's some comedy manga. But anyways, they made a live action adaptation of it, and it is by far top tier content. Like it is, it's hilarious. Like,
okay.
Again, as far as J dramas go, like they tend to a lot of times be like super corny, super cheesy, low production value. This one was made, I think, in like 2018, end of 2018, and it's like top quality, really, really good camera work, good. Like it's comedy, so like the jokes are pretty good. It's got like an all-star celebrity cast. Like there are a lot of really talented people in it. So Kyou Orewa, if you haven't seen that one, like you're wasting your life. Let's see. The other one I have on here is Replay and Destroy, which I feel like probably most people haven't heard of because I can't find it. I can't find it in the usual spots on the internet. So you can find it on Amazon, or I watched it in Japan on Unext. So that's a Japanese streaming service equivalent to like Netflix or Hulu or something like that. So if you can get something like that, like you can try that. But that was one of my all-time favorites. And again, it's because it feels like the humor is much more, I don't know, Americanized maybe, because it's like very quick, very like, I don't know, not slapstick necessarily, but goofy.
What's it called again?
Replay and Destroy.
Okay, I'm gonna write this one down.
Yeah, it's 20-minute episodes. It was only 8. It's 20-minute episodes, and there's only 8 of them. So it's pretty short series, but it's got a couple good ones, and it's just lots of rapid dialogue back and forth between goofy characters. So it's.
I want to say, if you search it on YouTube, which I just did, it seems like. I don't know if the subtitles are there or not, but it seems like someone has all the episodes on YouTube.
I think they might have been hard subbed. I don't remember why I ignored those, but they might be there. That actually reminds me that I've been toying around with hard subs this week because I found I put this on Twitter, but Naruto Kai. Have you heard about that? Like you see.
I haven't watched it, but I've heard about it.
Yeah. So basically, Naruto, the most filler-filled anime of all time, 720 episodes. You're probably right. You're probably right. Like it's just chocked full of filler, and so the fans took all the filler out of it essentially, and then they also took out all the recaps and then made it flow so that it matches the manga volumes, which is like, dang. Wouldn't that be nice if more anime just like had like, oh, this is volume 1, this is volume 2, like.
And they're about an hour, right? Each episode.
Yeah, it's like hour and 20 minutes. It's longer than your normal one, but there's 72 episodes versus 720.
Wow. This is for Naruto the entire
series, Shippuden too.
Wow. I kind of want to watch this.
So that there's a thing. It's fan made. So you'll have to find it where your Spider-Man with the pirate hat where he looks.
Yeah.
But they are not great quality, like the way that, because again, like it relies on the fans actually stitching together the show. So there's kind of various sources, not always the best. Like it's like 480p, and then the hard subs are just sprinkled throughout certain episodes. So it's like that's why I made, like, if you haven't seen it, I posted on Twitter, but there's like a subtitle file and it just puts black bars over your screen where the subtitles would be. So then like so for something like you're talking about on like YouTube with Replay and Destroy, you could probably download those episodes off YouTube and then use like that subtitle blocker, and that might help out people who are dealing with hard subs.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. What was that? Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say this just reminds me of like, so I'm gonna talk about English media real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
This reminds me of Pulp Fiction. So have you seen that movie?
I have. I don't remember it. I don't remember. It's been a while, but go ahead.
So with Pulp Fiction, the movie is kind of like out of order.
Yeah.
It's like the different scenes are out of order, which people love. But my college roommate was like, "Hey, we have Pulp Fiction." And I was like, "Oh, sweet, we're gonna watch it." That was our big thing. But he was like, "But I found it to where like fans put all of the scenes in order, and that's the only Pulp Fiction that I've ever seen. So I haven't seen the movie with the parts are out of order. I've only seen the one where it's like beginning, end. This is all the parts rearranged in the correct order that they should be in." So Kai kind of reminds me of that, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's kind of like amazing."
Fans fixing stuff. Yeah, because I found. I do remember that part of it and finding it really confusing. I don't know if I'm not woke enough to understand like why that's the right artistic choice for that movie, but it was like it was kind of a turnoff. But that reminds me of, I don't remember what the name of it is, but it's a really popular light novel series and anime where it's like somewhere in between them. They're like in the anime series, like it just came out with its 20th light novel that everybody has been waiting for, and it was like but in the anime that they made, there's like 8 episodes, maybe it's 6, I don't remember, but it's like 8 episodes that chronologically they're the same episode 8 times, and they have like little differences, and people are like, yeah, don't watch this whole thing all the way through. Like you can actually reorganize it. Like they have like broadcast order, and then there's chronological order. Somebody will know because it's a ridiculous.
Is it like Fate?
Nah, it's not Fate. It's not Fate.
Okay.
But anyways, where I'm going with this is that they have a chronological order, but then they also have a broadcast order, and people are like, yeah, don't watch it in chronological order. Watch it in the order that they actually broadcast it, because having less of an idea of what's going on in the plot is apparently makes it more interesting. So it's like, like I don't buy that, but enough people said it to make me believe it. So all right, well, when I dive into whatever that series was that apparently I don't even know the name of, I'll check it out. All right. So any closing comments here, Jordan?
No real recommendations. I think Promised Neverland, I've just been chugging away at that, and I'm hopefully with the 5 a day or 5 a week, I will, finish sooner than later.
Yeah. I mean, it's 20 volumes, right? Yeah. So
I think so.
Chugging through that in no time, probably.
Oh, yeah.
And all right, so I guess in closing, where can people find you on the internet, Jordan?
So on Twitter, it's Bearded Super Saiyan, or Bearded SSJ, excuse me. And then on YouTube, it's Jordan's Journey. I still haven't figured out what I want to call myself.
Still working on that.
I don't know. I feel like as long as I'm providing value, I'll come up with the name later.
Right. All right. And then, as always, I'm Kanji Eater, Kanji Eater everywhere. So we will see you guys in episode 4. Have a good one.
Next. See you guys.